Across western China lies a desert so large that it appears to swallow roads, farms, and entire settlements at its edges. The Taklimakan is known as the Sea of Death. Its dunes are not fixed terrain. Wind can lift the surface, move sand across roads, bury irrigation channels, strip fields, and push the desert toward the oases that make life possible around the Tarim Basin. China's response was not to cover the entire desert with trees. That would be physically unrealistic. Instead, engineers, scientists, forestry teams, farmers, and construction crews spent more than 4 decades assembling a defensive system around its perimeter. The system included stabilized dunes, straw grids, windbreaks, drought-resistant vegetation, irrigation networks, photovoltaic installations, and managed oasis corridors. By the end of 2023, these separate defenses had been connected across 2,761 kilometers. But one dangerous gap remained. It was 285 kilometers long, located along the southern edge, and exposed to some of the strongest wind and sand conditions in the entire project. Closing that gap would complete a 3,046-kilometer ring around the Taklimakan. But the real engineering question was never simply how to plant trees in a desert. It was how to keep sand still long enough for anything to survive, and how to deliver enough water to keep that protection alive. The Taklimakan covers roughly 337,600 square kilometers. It is China's largest desert and one of the world's largest shifting sand deserts. Around its edge are cities, villages, farms, highways, pipelines, railways, and narrow green oases fed by rivers descending from distant mountains. This makes the boundary between oasis and desert critical. Wind crossing an open dune field transports sand by lifting fine particles and bouncing heavier grains across the surface. Repeated deposition can narrow canals, cover seedlings, reduce visibility, and raise maintenance costs. So the goal was not to defeat the Taklimakan. It was to reduce wind speed, interrupt sand movement, protect selected corridors, and strengthen the ring of oases already surrounding the desert. This was not one forest planted around one empty circle. It was a mosaic of site-specific defenses built across very different terrain. A desert perimeter this long does not behave the same way everywhere. Some sections contain low, widely spaced dunes. Others face tall, mobile ridges. Soil salinity, groundwater depth, wind direction, road access, and plant survival change from county to county. So the project was divided into zones. Near oases, shelterbelts could connect with existing farmland and vegetation. Along transport routes, dunes could be stabilized before planting. In remote areas, photovoltaic panels could reduce wind near the surface while generating electricity. Where straw grids were likely to be buried, taller upright barriers could be used. The sequence mattered. Planting directly into an active dune can waste seedlings and water before roots become established. So the first task was often mechanical. Slow the sand, shape the surface, create a protected micro area. Then add vegetation only where water and local conditions could support it. This is why the green wall is better understood as infrastructure than as a single line of trees. One of the simplest tools in the system is also one of the most recognizable: the straw checkerboard. Workers lay dry reeds or straw across the dune in a grid. Part of the material is pressed into the sand, leaving short vertical edges above the surface. The grid does not permanently lock the desert in place. It changes airflow near the ground. Wind entering each square loses energy, and sand falls into the protected cells. As the pattern fills, the dune develops a rougher, more stable skin. This creates time for crews to plant, roots to develop, and additional barriers to be installed before strong winds return. But checkerboards are not universal. If the squares are too large, wind may continue moving sand inside them. If they are too small, material and labor costs rise. On widely spaced or fast-moving dunes, ordinary grids may be buried too quickly. In those zones, engineers may combine checkerboards with taller barriers, land shaping, or vegetation. Even the spacing between treated strips matters. Researchers continue studying where barriers should be placed to stabilize sand effectively without covering every square meter unnecessarily. The checkerboard is not the entire solution. It is the temporary foundation on which the living part of the system can begin. Once the sand is stabilized, the hardest constraint appears: water. A shelter belt cannot survive simply because it is described as drought-resistant. Drought-resistant plants still need water while establishing their roots. and many sections require continuing irrigation during dry periods.
Flow
The
rate is holding
Taklimakan's
at
edge
optimal
receives
levels.
limited and highly
Sector 3
variable
gates
natural
are fully
moisture.
operational.
Water must therefore be
Diverting
managed
to
from
the main
available
storage
local
network.
sources. These can include river diversions, seasonal floodwater, irrigation networks, and groundwater in selected locations. In planted zones, crews may level narrow strips, install pipes or drip lines, and place seedlings according to the expected reach of each water outlet. Drip irrigation can deliver water near the roots, but it is not automatically efficient. Evaporation, clogged emitters, leaks, mineral buildup, and poor scheduling can waste water. Saline groundwater may support selected plants, yet repeated irrigation can concentrate salt if drainage and species selection are poorly matched. Research on the Tarim Desert Highway shelterbelt has also identified substantial evaporation losses and limitations in drip irrigation efficiency. Use too little water, and seedlings die before their roots mature. Use too much, and the project consumes a scarce resource, raises costs, or worsens salinity. This is why the Greenbelt cannot be judged only by how many seedlings are planted. The more important questions are how many survive, how much water each section consumes, whether the source is sustainable, and whether the protection gained justifies the long-term demand. In this project, water is not an accessory. It is the material that keeps the entire biological structure standing. The next layer is biological. Species such as saxaul, tamarisk, red willow, desert poplar, and other locally selected shrubs and grasses are used because they can tolerate combinations of drought, wind, sand burial, and saline conditions better than ordinary trees. But even hardy species must be matched to the site. A plant suited to groundwater near one oasis may fail in a drier section. A shrub that survives salt may grow too slowly to provide rapid wind protection. A dense plantation may initially appear stronger, yet require more water and become less resilient during drought. For that reason, selected sections use mixed arrangements. Low shrubs reduce wind near the ground. Taller vegetation adds another layer. Roots bind the surface. Existing oasis forests connect new defenses to a broader network. In some areas, economic plants are integrated with sand control species. Sistange, for example, can be cultivated in association with desert shrubs, creating income that may help support continued maintenance. That economic connection matters. A protective belt extending thousands of kilometers cannot depend only on an initial construction campaign. It needs local workers, nurseries, inspection teams, replacement planting, water system repairs, and reasons for nearby communities to continue caring for it. The strongest section is not necessarily the one with the most plants. It is the one whose ecology, water supply, and local economy can remain connected over time. In the most remote areas, the project uses more than plants and straw. Photovoltaic installations can create a different type of desert control zone. Panel arrays interrupt wind near the surface and cast partial shade below. Electricity generation gives the site an economic function, while drought-tolerant vegetation may be established between or beneath the rows where conditions allow. Solar panels do not automatically restore a desert. Foundations, roads, cleaning, drainage, dust, and vegetation still require careful design, but the combination can make selected remote sites more practical. Mechanization is also changing the work. Bulldozers level surfaces. Equipment prepares irrigation lines. Specialized machines drill holes or transplant seedlings. Intelligent planting robots have been tested in some locations to increase speed and reduce repetitive labor. Yet automation cannot assume every dune has the same wind exposure, moisture, or soil. The advantage comes from combining survey data, local experience, machinery, water control, plant science, and inspection. The project succeeds only when each technology is used where it solves a specific problem. Planting creates the photograph. Maintenance creates the barrier. Every section begins to change as soon as construction crews leave. Wind can expose irrigation pipes. Sand can bury access tracks. Emitters can clog. Pumps can fail. Grazing or vehicle movement can damage young plants. Drought can kill an entire row while a nearby row survives. Salt can build up around roots. A fire, pest outbreak, or unusually severe storm can open a weakness that expands over time. That means the Greenbelt has to be treated like a living utility network. Teams inspect survival rates, replace dead seedlings, repair pipes, clear buried equipment, reinforce sand barriers, and adjust irrigation. Nurseries must continue producing suitable plants. Monitoring must distinguish between a temporary seasonal decline and a section that is structurally failing. The ring also does not become maintenance-free when the plants mature. Some routes eventually improve stability and reduce irrigation demand, but other sections may remain water-dependent. Mechanical barriers decay, while pumps and solar facilities require service. This is the central vulnerability of the project. A 3,046-kilometer belt can be completed on a map in one day. Keeping it functional is a permanent operation. Scientific teams continued inspecting the entire perimeter after completion to assess its effectiveness, identify problems, and improve the engineering, biological, and photovoltaic control methods. By the end of 2023, China reported that 2,761 kilometers of sand-blocking greenbelt had connected the scattered oases around the Taklimakan. The remaining 285 kilometers were not simply the last pieces on a convenient route. They crossed the southern edge of the desert, where severe wind and moving sand made construction especially difficult. Crews could not copy one standard detail across the entire gap. In selected zones, they installed straw checkerboards and planted drought-tolerant shrubs. In others, upright barriers were required because ordinary grids could be buried. Water delivery methods had to be adapted to local supply. Machinery prepared the terrain, while photovoltaic and biological measures were used where they fit the site.
Check the depth.
The work was less like drawing a green line and more like closing a chain of engineering weak points. On November 28, 2024, planting in Yutian County marked the reported completion of the final section. For the first time, the full 3,046-kilometer circumference was connected by a sand-blocking protective network. The milestone was visually simple. Seedlings were placed into prepared desert ground. But behind that moment were more than 4 decades of zoning, dune stabilization, irrigation construction, plant selection, replacement work, and thousands of local decisions about where each method could survive. The final kilometer did not conquer the Taklimakan. It closed the last major opening through which its moving sand could directly attack the ring of oases without an engineered defense. The completed ring is often described as a wall around the desert. That image is powerful, but it can also be misleading. The belt is not a solid forest. It does not seal sand inside the Taklimakan, stop regional drought, eliminate dust storms, or transform the desert into farmland. Its function is targeted: reduce wind speed, trap moving sand before it reaches roads and fields, reinforce oasis boundaries, protect transport corridors, connect previously separated defenses. The effectiveness will still vary by location and season. A belt that works near one oasis may require a different width, plant mix, or barrier geometry elsewhere. Long-term results will depend on water availability, survival rates, maintenance quality, and whether the system is widened or reinforced as conditions change. Completion, therefore, is not the end of the experiment. It is the moment when the project changes from building a ring to proving that the ring can endure. Officials and researchers have similarly described the belt as an ecological barrier that must continue to be consolidated, rather than as a permanently completed forest. The most difficult future question is not whether another seedling can be planted. It is whether the entire system can remain ecologically and economically sustainable. Water demand must be balanced against agriculture, cities, rivers, and groundwater. Pumping requires energy. Pipes, roads, and labor remain continuing costs. Climate variability may also change the original design assumptions. Hotter conditions increase evaporation. River flows can shift. New wind patterns can move sand around an existing barrier. The answer cannot simply be denser planting. Some zones may need wider mechanical stabilization with less vegetation. Others may need better irrigation control. Remote sensing, field surveys, and maintenance records can identify weak sections before they become gaps. China has already moved into a new phase of consolidation, widening, and continued desert control work following the 2024 closure. Xinjiang's subsequent plans included widening the barrier and continuing treatment along the Taklimakan's perimeter, rather than treating the enclosure as the end of the work. That is an important admission built into the project itself. A living wall is never finished in the same way as a concrete dam or a steel bridge. Its components grow, die, migrate, clog, decay, and respond to the weather. The construction phase ends. The management phase does not. The Taklimakan remains a vast, active desert. Its dunes still move. Its winds still carry sand. Its interior has not become green, and that was never the practical objective. What changed is the edge. Across 3,046 kilometers, separate defenses were gradually linked into one perimeter system. Oasis forests, shelter belts, straw checkerboards, upright barriers, irrigation lines, desert shrubs, photovoltaic zones, roads, machines, and the people maintaining all of them. The project's most important lesson is not that nature can be overpowered by planting enough trees. It is that large environmental threats can sometimes be reduced through layers of modest interventions, with each one designed for a specific failure mode. Straw changes the wind at the surface. Roots hold the stabilized sand. Water keeps the roots alive. Monitoring finds the weak points. Maintenance prevents those weak points from becoming gaps. And local economic activity gives communities a reason to keep the system operating. On a satellite image, the completed belt may look like a line. On the ground, it is thousands of separate engineering decisions that must continue working together. China did not build a wall that ends the desert. It built a living piece of infrastructure designed to stop the desert from advancing where people, farms, roads, and oases cannot afford to move.